Well, good morning, everybody. I thought I'd just do a quick follow-up from Hurricane Harvey and really Hurricane Irma as well. We fared well here, so no problems. We were very grateful that we didn't have any issues here at our home, but I can't say as much for a lot of our friends and family down south, and many Texans, of course, were affected. And then, of course, Irma showed up just a week later. So it's been a pretty wild ride here in not only Texas, but for just people in Florida and really just the South. It's been kind of crazy. I went through a couple of days here where we were watching trees and everything, but luckily none of our trees fell over, although some did fall over in the neighborhood. So that was a little nerve-wracking, but nothing near what we saw, of course, in Houston. Watching some of the stories come out of Houston was really uplifting, and I heard many people say, like, Houstonians really brought back the faith in like humanity, which is awesome to hear that. And there's been so much effort and work put into restoration that I think Houston's going to bounce back pretty quickly. For the most part, there's still some areas that that are just now getting water out of there. There's a lot of demolition. There's a lot of trash. There's a lot of logistics to get kind of pinned down for a lot of that stuff. What I'm starting to see now, though, is it's being addressed about the flooding in Houston. For those of you that are not familiar, we had floods in 2015, 2016, and then this year with Hurricane Harvey. Now, with that being said, I don't think there's any amount of drainage that would have helped or stopped rather flooding in Houston because of the amount of rainfall that came down, which was crazy. And if you watch some of the videos, you'll see some of the bayous, they filled up. It took them, 24 hours to fill. It took them 24 hours to drain, and they were back to normal. So the drainage in a lot of these areas are really pretty dang good. Hats off to the engineers for that. However, there's a lot of other areas that it's not, and there's been some major talk about how to approach that, because we're hearing now from engineers that have been saying, hey, we've said that this could be a potential problem, and yet we still have developers showing up in these areas. We see a lot of the wetland biologists saying, look, we're a bayou city, you can't build in these areas, or it's not a good idea because we do have this flooding. And we've known about flooding. I mean, Houston flooded, I think it was back in the 1920s or 30s, pretty bad. So there's definitely a needed time for talk about the drainage in that area. And in other places here in Montgomery County, we have issues as well. So I'm glad to see that that's starting to ramp up, because it is a major issue here. There's some houses that have flooded 3 years in a row, and I know anecdotal from coworkers at their house, they weren't even done remodeling, and now they're having to redo it all over again. So hopefully that'll be addressed. Irma was huge. Luckily, it didn't drop nearly as much rain in Florida, and it ended up not being as destructive as it potentially could have been because of its path. But still some major damage there. The thing that I took away from all of this, after watching kind of people's stories, I was very pleased that so many people came out and volunteered to help out. I myself went out and tried to go and help, but everybody had been evacuated. Everybody was in front of the game on that one, so that was awesome to hear. But I think what I want to do is kind of address some of the issues that I saw. A lot of people just had to get up and leave. Like, they had no idea that they were about to flood, or about the drainage area near them was about to flood, or what drainage area they were even in. So I think over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to get my mind kind of straight and really try to figure out more of a practical preparation. And what I mean by that is I'm going to start out small, because a lot of these people weren't ready for anything. They just literally just walked out with their shoes and the clothes on their back, and that was it. So I think what I'm going to try to do is start small and say, okay, look, here's what you need, the most basic things you need to keep together for, say, a thunderstorm or a power outage for a 24-hour period, or for two days. What about for tornadoes or hurricanes, which I've already done that, but I'm going to reassess that and try to approach that maybe a different way. And really try to point people towards how to get information. a friend of mine, as I mentioned before, pointed me in the direction of some really good apps, so that you can kind of see where the weather is at, where the rainfall is at. But I also want to point out to where you can go and find things like, when is the river that's next to your house expected to crest or be out of its banks, or the streams, or what watershed you're in. Because, if it rains 5 miles down the road, 20 inches of water, that may not affect me because I'm not in the same watershed. That's going to flow somewhere else. Now, if it's in this certain area, then yes, I could potentially be affected by that. So it was a lack of information, and I would like to put some things out there to try to help people do that. And what I mean by being more practical, and I'll shut up about it, is, the Red Cross and everything has a great sheet on, like, hey, gather all these things together, prescriptions and all that stuff. Well, that may not be practical on a day-to-day basis. But if you have most everything packed and ready to go, then those things are simply just throw it in the bag and get the hell out of there. The flooding one's going to be a little tricky because there's not much you can do but grab your crap and just get out of there. There is no shelter-in process for flooding. It's leave if you can. If you can't, get on the top of the roof. So we'll address that. Anyway, I just want to check in, let you know how everything's going, and we'll see you soon.